right, everyone, welcome to another episode of UX Pathways. And I have the honor of having Susan Weinschenk on our podcast today. How are you, Susan?
I'm great. How are you, Mark?
Great. As you know, I've been a fan of all of your work. I have your book, and I know you've done multiple books, but there's one in particular that I know many of our listening audience or viewing audience may have in their possession. But for everyone out there, I would love for you to explain what is your current role in the industry?
Well, technically, my job title is CEO and Chief Behavioral Scientist, fancy, fancy, at the Team W Inc. And what that really means is I have my own consulting company that I started many years ago in partnership with my son, of all people, which was a surprise to me when that happened. And I do a combination of user experience work and also behavioral design, like we call it. I have a PhD in psychology, so my approach to user experience has always been from, what do we know about humans, and then how do we take that information and use it to design interfaces, products, technology that fit the humans that are using it. So that's always been my role, and that's my current career role.
And what were some of the books that you've written?
Oh my goodness. It's I've written a lot of books, and in fact, this is going to sound crazy, but just yesterday, because I was thinking about the process of book writing, and I was talking with someone who is at the beginning of being an author, and uh, I was trying to give encouragement. So I said, well, my most famous book, which is 100 Things Every Designer Needs to Know About People, that was not my first book. And they said, oh, how many other books did you? And I had to stop and count. And I realized that book, which is the one, like I said, that's been the most widely read, was my sixth book that I ever wrote. So, and then I went on and wrote more after that. So, you know, if you're interested in book writing, which a lot of people aren't, you just have to understand that maybe the first one is not the one that resonates, and that's okay, but don't give up. If I had given up after I wrote my first book, if I'd said, well, that was interesting and a couple of people seem to like it, but it's not that popular, I would have never gone on and written the others. So you can't give up.
Yeah, I know we were talking about music before we started, but it's kind of like,
Yeah,
writing a hit song or something. It's like
it
just because you're
is.
writing songs, maybe the timing, there's so many things that are involved in.
And a lot of it, I think, is chance. And so, and a lot of other things. Yeah. So, if you really are passionate about something, you just keep going. That's what I think.
I love it. And how did you get into this industry?
Well, I'm without giving away my age, let's just say I've been in the industry a really long time. And so I go all the way back to before it really was an industry. I mean, when I first started, there were literally a handful of people in the US who were doing this as external consultants. There were some people doing this kind of work inside a few large companies, but there were not very many people doing it. It wasn't called user experience. It was called human factors. This idea of taking the human into account when you're designing technology. I got into it. I was a graduate student in at Penn State. I was getting a PhD in psychology, and they had a weird uh, requirement for graduate students. You had to take a foreign language, which is not weird. But the weird part is you could substitute a computer language, which I think is weird. And I was like, well, I took French and that was okay. But so I think I'll do a computer. I had never, programmed computers. Computers were quite new back then. That's how far away it is. And I went and I wrote my first computer program, some silly thing assignment that was supposed to add up a bunch of numbers and whatever. And I submitted the program and got back the answer, which was job aborted. And that's all it said, job aborted. And I was like, well, what the heck does that mean? And then I had this insight, and I still remember, Mark, I can remember where I was and what I was doing and the room I was in when I had this aha moment in which I said, you can't, if that's the way the computer is going to communicate, no one will be able to do anything. It's got to be more conversational, human. It's got to work for humans. And that was when I decided. I decided at that point I was going to continue with my PhD, but I was going to start to blend. Now, psychology with technology. I thought I was inventing something new. I had no idea this was a whole thing, that it was a field at that time called human factors or computer human interaction. And so then I found that out, and then I just went on from there.
That's amazing. And you talked about that first reaction to that message, and that just leads me to a question. Why do you think it is so hard creating a positive user
It's so
experience?
interesting to me. When you get into this field, as you probably know, Mark, and as it, anybody who's listening has maybe had the experience here, once you start to think about this whole thing, right? Positive user experience, can't we do better? Then you see it everywhere. You get into an elevator and you're like, why do they have the numbers there? And, I mean, you just start analyzing everything. And just yesterday, um, my husband was trying to buy a season's pass for cross-country skiing. We live in Wisconsin. There's a lot of snow finally, and he wanted to go skiing. And the experience was just terrible. And it was interesting because, he thought it was him. And he said, "Can you help me?" And I went and looked at it and I was like, "Oh, wow, this is such a bad experience." And so there are many, many, many bad user experiences out in the world. I guess I should be happy because it keeps me in business. But you feel like asking. It's been decades, decades that we've known how to design a good user experience, an experience that works for the people trying to use that product. Why do we keep doing this? And I think it's a combination of things. I really do. I think it's the process by which software is developed is very flawed, in my opinion, from a human factors point of view. I think that there is very short-sightedness uh, about what's necessary or what's important or what's worth it. It
Hmm.
takes time and energy to design things right for humans. And the people who are doing it, some of them, honestly, I'll be really honest, some of them just don't care. Most of them just don't realize. There, we get very focused, and if your job is this over here, software development or something like you can't see and pay attention and know everything. I don't know, I have done some programming besides that one graduate school experience, but I don't know, if you sat me down and said, "Can you share with us, some of the principles of good code writing?" I'd look at you and go, "Absolutely not." Right? And so we shouldn't expect that people who are in the world over here, whatever their world is, software engineering, all that stuff, we shouldn't expect that they should know better or they should do a better job at designing the interface to be usable for humans. It's not their job. But but the disconnect, right, is that the people who do pay attention to that and know how to do it and aren't brought in to the project, and they're not brought in at the right points in the project, and that's why it fails. So it really is a awareness and a willingness problem to pay attention and to take care of it.
And part of your consulting practice, I know that that is part of your mission is is to spread that knowledge. And I guess for you in your career, what have you done to encourage positive user experience for end users?
Well, luckily in some ways it's kind of easy because the people I'm trying to influence are humans. And so if you can give them, everybody has used poor software that has a poor user experience. There's no one on the planet that's used technology that hasn't had a poor experience, right? So it's not like something esoteric that is very difficult to explain, right? So it's really more about figuring out what are the things you can show and the way you can talk about it that gives people the aha moment, that aha experience where they see it from a different place. And that's can be tricky in itself, but it's not that hard to do, and it's actually a lot of fun. I mean, in a lot of the training that and workshops that we do, Mark, I think are the most important thing we do is we engineer experiences that people have, and they go, oh, where they suddenly and they get an insight about why what they've been doing is resulting in a bad user experience. But basically, you have to know about people. You have to know about how people see and think and pay attention. And, if you know about those things, then it's a matter of looking at a particular situation. I'm designing the screen or page or audio interaction. What are the things I need to pay attention to make sure it's a good experience?
That's where that brain science I
It's my
see
favorite. I just love
is
it.
starting to come in. So you're trying to really step in their shoes and understand that people may not actually think and react the way that you are, the person that's developing it.
Exactly.
And that's where some of the education comes in. And I've seen it firsthand. So I'm I'm well aware of how you have conducted your sessions around the just the power of brain science. And for you, what about that topic? I mean, it you said from day one that seeing that error message, that's when you knew this is what I'm going to do?
It really was. It really was. It was just I love psychology. I love studying it. I think I've always been studying humans. I mean, that for me goes back to when I was a little kid. Always fascinated as by why people do something or why they don't do something. Um, so I think for me, the interesting place for me was that applying that to technology. I had not thought about that. I was in graduate school
Mm.
not planning on doing that. Like I said, I didn't know it existed. I was going to go be a college professor and just teach psychology and but I always did like technology. I was always thought technology was fun and interesting. I was very curious about, computers and all that because it was, like I said, it was a long time ago. And so to me, putting those things together, I don't know, it just made sense to me.
And for all those that are thinking about, should I get into the profession?
Yeah.
And it's always a hard balance of knowing where you may land. What advice do you have for people that are looking to be advocates for end users?
Well, I think that I have a lot of advice. I always have a lot to say about these things. I guess if I, you know, boil it down, I would say, first of all, when the field first started, there was, you couldn't get a degree in it. I mean, I have a PhD in psychology. There wasn't any human factors degrees, human computer interaction degrees, UX degrees. Now there are. There wasn't back then. And yet a lot of very, very wonderful people got into the field and did great work. So don't feel, people often come to me and say, should I go back to school? You might, maybe, and it might be a lot of fun. Go get a master's in human computer interaction, but you don't have to, right? So there's a lot that you can teach yourself. Um, you, the most important criteria is a passion for designing experiences that fit the people that need to use them, that are easy to use and easy to learn, and positive and even sometimes fun and joyful, depending on what you're designing. And if you to have a passion for that, that is the most important criteria. I've worked with companies over the years where I've trained their whoever at their organization to be UX people, people from visual design backgrounds, programming backgrounds, customer service backgrounds, right? All kinds of backgrounds. As long as you have some technology experience and the passion, you can learn to do it. If you don't have the passion, I can't teach you. It won't work. You don't want to do it. And there are people I've met who are like, I don't like this. This isn't fun. It's like, okay, now you know. Um, so I would say background is not critical. Passion is critical to it. And then you have to learn, you have to teach yourself. There's courses and things to read and you have to try it out and apply it. Um, and I don't mean to make that sound easy because it is a huge body of knowledge. It's a huge body of knowledge. There's the whole brain science part of it, and there's also just the principles, the best practices. And there's lots of those. You don't have to reinvent this. There have been people who've been working on this for decades. So there's a lot of just good basic, here's what you do, here's what you don't do. And there's methodologies and processes that will help you. It's all there. So it is a lot of work to learn it. Um, and it will take time, and you're not going to get it all at once. It's going to be a growing thing, but it's certainly possible to do. So if it's something, and Mark, as you know, there's so many different roles you can play. You can do design, you can do research into a particular target audience, and therefore, what do we need to know about them that will help the designers? You don't even have to be a UX designer. You can be a UX researcher, and that can be part of what you do. So, there's a lot of different roles you can play in it, which I think is also kind of fun. And then you can move around and I'm going to do strategy. I'm going to do research. I'm going to do design, and you can combine them or specialize. I think it's just, great fun. And then you also can specialize in a particular technology, voice, apps, complicated software, physical devices, lots of opportunities.
Yeah, there's so much there to unpack, Susan. I love the fact that you started talking about there's kind of a combination of these roles because we get a lot of questions about, well, everybody at my company wants me to do all the roles. Well, there is a maturity factor there. There is the size of the company. There's so many
Yes.
factors there that could determine that. But sure, you could have blended roles, and I'm glad that you touched on that.
There's even a role that I think is quite fun. Some people would not think it was fun, but it's being a UX writer. Just being the person who cares about and pays attention to the wording that is used on labels and instructions. And that's relatively new as a specialized role. That's probably the newest specialized role I've seen. We all did it for years. We had to pay attention to the instructions or the phrase on the screen. But now there's actually people who specialize in that. Now, some people look at me and go, okay, I do not want that job. And then there's other people that get really excited about it, right? So
Yeah,
I,
because
I
there's a
just,
lot of nuance in it.
there's a lot of nuance in it. And there's a lot of words on screens.
This is true. And as you said, depending on what you're applying it to, there could
Yeah.
be industry jargon and so many other things
Yeah.
that you're trying to make sure that someone knows what to do next, which is
Yes.
always a challenge. I love this
Yeah.
conversation. This has been great. If people wanted to find more about you, where would they go?
Yeah. I guess the easiest thing to do, you can go to our website, which is theteamw.com. And also, and at that website, there's a link to blog that I write. There's a link to our podcast we do. And then also on LinkedIn, if you just look for Susan Weinschenk on LinkedIn, you'll find me there. And I do a lot of posting there as well.
Well, Susan, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. I really think that everything you shared today gives a lot of inspiration for those that are either in the field, looking to get into the field. There's so many things here to unpack and really appreciate you sharing all of your experiences.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you.
Thank you.